All right, today we're going to dive into a story of wealth and power on a scale that is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're talking about a fortune so vast it could build entire cities from scratch, fund armies across 3 different continents, and frankly make today's top billionaires look like they're just getting started. So, here's the big question. Could an ancient king really have been richer than the tech titans who basically run our modern world? The answer? Oh, it's a huge, resounding yes. And not just by a little bit. We're talking by a margin that will totally change the way you think about ancient history. So who is this guy? His name was Darius the Great, the ruler of the massive Persian Empire. But see, he wasn't your typical conqueror who just hoarded piles of gold. No, he was more like an architect, the architect of a gigantic economic machine. He was a genius who didn't just collect wealth, he engineered it. To really get Darius, you have to first understand the sheer, mind-boggling scale of his empire. He inherited a kingdom, sure, but he built it into something else entirely. An empire that stretched from the edges of Greece all the way down through Egypt and clear across to India. He was in charge of an estimated 70 million people. Just think about that for a second. And this is what made him so different. So many rulers before him were just, smash and grab. They'd take the spoils of war and lock them up. Darius, on the other hand, created a calculated system. Every mine, every field, every single trade route was a piece of this giant living network, all designed to funnel prosperity to the heart of his empire in a steady, predictable, stable way. So you're probably wondering, how on earth did he pull that off? What was the secret sauce? What was the core mechanism that powered this incredible economic engine? Well, it all came down to a totally revolutionary system for governing and, you guessed it, for taxation. He came up with what we now call the satrapy system. He basically took his massive empire and chopped it up into manageable provinces or satrapies. Each one was run by a local governor, and their job was simple: collect a fixed, predictable tax and send it to the royal treasury. I mean, for the time, this was absolutely groundbreaking. This system created this incredible economic heartbeat for the empire. You had Egypt paying in grain, India paying in gold dust, Media paying in horses. The steady, reliable flow of tribute meant that, for maybe the first time in history, wealth wasn't just being hoarded in a vault, it was being managed, it was being reinvested to fund the whole shebang. And the result of all this? Historians estimate that at its peak, Darius's empire controlled over 20% of the entire world's GDP. Just let that number sink in. 20%. In a world with a much smaller population and fewer competing powers, that concentration of wealth was just a feat of unbelievable economic dominance. To put that into perspective, that would be like one single entity today controlling the entire combined economic power of both the United States and China. It's a level of concentrated wealth that's almost impossible for us to even imagine. Okay, so having all that cash is one thing, but it's kind of useless if you can't move it and use it, right? And that's where Darius's genius for infrastructure comes into play. He created the physical and financial networks to make his economic machine run like a dream. He built the Royal Road. Think of it as the ancient world's first superhighway, a 2,700-kilometer road connecting the farthest corners of his empire. And along this road, he set up relay stations so a messenger could get from one end to the other in as little as 9 days. In the ancient world, that was like breaking the sound barrier. It was just unheard of. Hey, does that phrase sound a little familiar? It probably should. Centuries later, it became the unofficial motto of the United States Postal Service. It's a direct echo of the unstoppable Persian couriers who raced along Darius's Royal Road. How cool is that? Darius also understood a really basic economic truth. Wealth is only powerful if it can move. To fix this, he introduced one of the most powerful concepts in history, a standardized currency. He created a gold coin called the Daric, and it was known for being incredibly pure and always having the same weight. Suddenly, a merchant in Egypt and a trader in India were using the same value system. The Daric became the gold standard of its time. It was so trusted that people were still using it centuries after the Persian Empire fell. So in modern terms, Darius didn't just print money. He pretty much invented monetary policy. So what do you do with that kind of unbelievable wealth? Well, you build a symbol of it. A symbol so powerful it'll last for eternity. You build Persepolis. And this is a really important thing to understand. Persepolis wasn't a fortress. It wasn't your typical capital city. Its entire purpose was to be a statement piece. Every single column, every carving, it was all designed to project one single message to the world. This is the wealth of the world, and it all flows right here to Persia. The city itself was like a physical map of the empire's enormous economic reach. The materials came from every corner of the known world. You had cedar from Lebanon, precious stones from Afghanistan, ivory from India, and get this, it wasn't built by slaves. We have records showing that over 20,000 workers were paid fair wages, housed, and fed by the royal treasury. The empire was just that rich. The sheer amount of wealth stored in the treasury at Persepolis was so legendary that even Greek historians, who, were often rivals of the Persians, they wrote about it with total astonishment. One of them actually wrote, "Even the gods would envy the gold of Persia." So what's the real legacy of all this? It's way more than just some pretty ruins and old gold coins. What Darius left behind was a blueprint for how to build and run a civilization. You see, his real genius wasn't about hoarding things. It was about creating stability by standardizing things. By introducing fixed weights and measures across his empire, he built trust. A merchant in Babylon knew he wasn't going to get cheated by a merchant in Bactria. And that trust, that's the fuel for predictable economic growth on a scale nobody had ever seen before. And you can draw a straight line from his innovations to our world today. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he didn't destroy its financial system, he adopted it. The Romans, they based their own systems of taxes and government on the Persian model. Even the basic principles behind modern central banking have their roots in the ideas that Darius pioneered. So ultimately, the greatest treasure that Darius left behind wasn't those mountains of gold in Persepolis. It was the blueprint. It was the idea that true, lasting power comes from infrastructure, from fairness, and from a brilliantly organized system. He proved that prosperity could actually be engineered. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When we look at our complex global systems of finance and trade and administration, how much of it is really new? And how much of it is just a modern, high-tech version of a blueprint that was designed by an ancient Persian king 2,500 years ago?